I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, coffee still steaming in my hand, when the doorbell rang. Not knocked, rang, long, confident, like whoever was outside already owned the place. When I opened the door, my heart dropped straight into my stomach. My parents stood there. Behind them was my sister, Lydia. And behind Lydia, 2 suitcases and a man in a blazer holding a leather folder. "Hannah," my mother said, forcing a smile. "We need to talk." The man stepped forward before I could respond. "Ms. Brooks, I'm a real estate consultant. We've been contacted regarding the possible sale of this unit." I laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. "The what?" Lydia didn't even look ashamed. She crossed her arms and said, "Don't act surprised. You have a condo worth $500,000. I'm drowning. We're family." My father sighed dramatically. "Just listen. If you sell, it solves everything." That was the moment I realized they hadn't come to visit. They had come to take. Stay with me for a moment, because this didn't start at my front door. It started years earlier, when my life quietly became a resource everyone felt entitled to use. Before we get into the story, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Your car, your kitchen, your bedroom, or somewhere far from home? Wherever you are, stay with me. My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 30 years old. I work as a clinical trials program manager at a biomedical technology company in Portland, Oregon. In my professional life, I'm known for being precise, ethical, and unmovable when it comes to boundaries. I protect my team fiercely. I don't allow data manipulation. I don't tolerate pressure disguised as urgency. At work, people listen when I speak. At home, or what used to be home in Riverton, Idaho, I was invisible unless I was useful. My sister Lydia was always finding herself. New business ideas, new brands, new online boutiques that burned bright and died fast. Every time she failed, my parents circled around her like paramedics. Every time she needed help, the call came to me. "Hannah, can you loan her a little money? Hannah, can you watch the kids this weekend? Hannah, you're good with numbers. Can you fix this?" No one ever asked if I could afford it, or if I was tired, or if I wanted to say no. When I told them I was moving to Portland for a promotion, my mother barely looked up from her phone. When I bought my first apartment, my first real asset, my father asked one question: "How much is it worth?" That should have been my warning, but I still believed distance would change things. For 2 years, I built a quiet life. I worked long hours. I paid my mortgage on time. I bought furniture slowly, intentionally. I adopted a dog. For the first time, my life felt like mine. Until the day my phone exploded with missed calls. "Hannah," my mother said when I finally answered, "We're coming to see you." I didn't give permission. They came anyway. And they didn't come empty-handed. They came with a plan. With pressure. With a fake real estate agent they had contacted behind my back, convinced that if they spoke confidently enough, I would fold. "You don't need this place," Lydia said in my living room, gesturing around like it was already sold. "You could rent. I can't rent. I have debt." "That's not my responsibility," I said. My voice shook, but I said it. My father's face hardened. "So you're just going to let your sister fail?" Something snapped in me then, not loudly, cleanly. "No," I said. "I'm going to stop letting you make me responsible for her choices." They stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. That night, after they left, furious, stunned, certain I'd come around, I sat alone on my couch and knew I have to fight this time. But I don't know, back then, this invasion, this attempt to sell my life out from under me, was only the beginning. I remember the exact moment I realized that putting my foot down wasn't optional, it was survival. The city recorder's office smelled faintly of old paper and antiseptic. I signed the notarized affidavit with hands that were steady, though my heart pounded like a drum. Every stroke of the pen, every official stamp felt like I was etching a line of fire around my life. I was claiming ownership, not just of property, but of my boundaries, something I had never done before with this level of clarity. Walking out of the office into the gray Portland afternoon, I felt the chill bite through my coat, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, the world outside my apartment felt like a neutral space. The power I had always surrendered at home was back in my hands, held tightly and deliberately. My phone buzzed, and I saw Ryan's name light up the screen. I could feel him already on the other end, wanting to protect me, wanting to make this ordeal easier by being physically present. "I can move in with you, Hannah," he said, voice almost pleading. We can face this together. They won't dare try anything if I'm there." I took a deep breath, letting the weight of his words settle. I put my hand over mine and looked out the window at the city skyline, the early winter fog curling around the rooftops. "No," I said softly, firm. "This is mine to handle. I cannot use you as a shield. I won't. This is the lesson. I have to learn how to stand on my own." My voice carried a calmness that surprised even me. I could hear him inhale sharply, then slowly exhale. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he whispered, almost in awe. His admiration warmed me, but it didn't sway me. I needed to test my boundaries alone, to see if they could withstand the assault of expectation and entitlement. Later that week, I stood in front of my colleagues at Arcadia for an internal leadership seminar. The room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. I cleared my throat, looked at the sea of faces who respected my professional judgment, and began my talk on professional ethics and boundary setting. I didn't tell them my story, not the one about my family, not the one about being drained, invisible, and used. I sanitized it into a case study. I spoke of data integrity, workload management, and protecting your team from scope creep. For the final slide, I typed one sentence the night before. A boundary is not a wall. It is a door. It has a lock that only you control. I paused and let it hang. The room stayed quiet, then small nods. People understood instinctively. Some of them scribbled notes. This principle, so abstract yet so tangible, was now not just theoretical. It was living in my decisions, the echo of every no I had whispered to my family in private. After the seminar, I returned to my apartment, a small, sunlit loft in Portland, where everything belonged to me. Ryan had dropped by with Pip, my tiny schnauzer, who barked happily at the sight of me. I sat on the couch, letting the calm wash over me. I had enforced a legal and psychological firewall around my life, and it was working. Every object in the apartment, every corner, every key and lock was a statement. I decide who enters, what I share, and when I share it. That evening, I found myself reflecting on the quiet power of boundaries. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't retaliation. It wasn't avoidance. It was clarity. It was respect for myself. I thought about the family I had left behind, about Lydia and her endless demands, about the intrusions I had survived, and I understood. This moment, standing alone with the city below me, was the first time my life truly belonged to me. I made a decision then to carry that lesson forward. Every email I sent, every phone call I answered, every request I evaluated would be filtered through this lens. Does this respect my boundaries? Does it align with my values? Does it honor my autonomy? The world outside my apartment felt infinite, and for the first time, I was the keeper of the gate, not a servant to someone else's need. Ryan came over later to cook dinner, but even then, I reminded him gently, "I don't need a shield. I'm standing. You can sit, enjoy. But this is mine." He nodded, silently proud, and I knew he understood. In that apartment, with the smell of roasted garlic and the winter air creeping through the window, I felt the first real taste of freedom. Not the kind you demand from others, but the kind you claim yourself. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled without guilt. I was finally building my life on my terms, and no one could touch it. The Saturday afternoon I had chosen felt heavier than usual, even in the neutral beige of the community room. The sunlight slanted through the high windows, casting long rectangles across the polished floor. My phone buzzed one last time with a reminder. Family would arrive in 10 minutes. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest, and set my briefcase on the table. Inside were all the documents I'd meticulously prepared over the past week. The memorandum of boundaries lay on top, clipped with the notarized affidavit from the city recorder, a legal and symbolic declaration of everything I would and would not allow. When they arrived, mother, father, Lydia, and the two girls, I could see hesitation ripple through them. They weren't marching in as they had before, entitled and sure of their authority. They looked cautious. My mother's hands were clasped in front of her, Lydia's posture rigid, almost defensive. Ava and Mia stood close to their mother, whispering, holding on to each other. I smiled faintly at the girls. "Hi, Ava. Hi, Mia," I said, letting my voice soften just enough. "Good to see you. How was your flight?" They answered in quiet, clipped whispers, obedient for once. I gestured toward a small table in the corner. "You can read these," I said, placing 2 new graphic novels beside the ones I had brought last time. "Anything you want, sit here away from the main table and enjoy. I'm proud of you for following the rules." The girls nodded eagerly, moving to the corner, eyes lighting up with genuine interest. I let them be. At the main table, the adults took their seats. I sat at the head, placing my briefcase in front of me. I opened the timer app and set it for exactly 60 minutes, pressing start. Every eye in the room followed the digital countdown. I was in control. This was my protocol. "All right," I said, my voice steady, professional. "You have the floor. Start." The first 10 minutes crawled by in agonizingly polite, sterile conversation. My father talked about the weather in Riverton. My mother asked about the mountain outside the window. Lydia didn't speak at all, hands folded, her gaze fixed on the table. I watched their reactions closely, noting every twitch, every hesitation. Then, predictably, Lydia broke. Her voice was low, hard, but rising with frustration. "I just don't get it," she muttered. "You had all this, your condo, your career, everything, and you left us. You left me to drown." I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt emotionally. I held up one hand, palm out. "Strike 1, I said evenly. "Condition A has been violated. We are not discussing the sale of my property. Any further mention will be treated as a violation of the protocol." My words were calm, clinical, like reporting a breach at work. My mother gasped, hands flying to her face. My father's shoulders sagged. Lydia froze, wide-eyed. They were witnessing the power of a boundary for the first time, and it was immediate, enforceable, undeniable. I slid the stapled packets across the table to each of them. "This is how we will move forward. Read it carefully, understand the affidavit attached, reflect on your choices, your past actions, and the line you almost crossed. If you agree, you will sign. If not, our relationship will pause indefinitely. That is the consequence." I could see their minds racing. My mother's lips pressed together, trembling. My father reached for his copy slowly, as if it were a foreign object. Lydia's hands hovered over the paper, her usual confidence gone, replaced by an unspoken reckoning. The timer ticked on, relentless. Finally, I spoke again. "This meeting is not about past grievances. It is about the rules of engagement moving forward. No negotiation, no debate. My actions, my choices, my life. These are not open for discussion. You will read, understand, and decide." The room was quiet except for the faint click of the timer. I watched as they absorbed every word, every clause, every line. It was tense, electric, almost sacred. For the first time, I could see the weight of my autonomy reflected in their faces, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of control I had never allowed myself before. I leaned back slightly, observing. Ava and Mia were absorbed in their books, perfectly calm. The adults sat in rigid, silent contemplation, each processing the new order of things. I was no longer the endlessly available resource. I was the keeper of the rules, the architect of this interaction, and the first line of defense for my life. And in that moment, as the timer counted down, I realized I was no longer negotiating for attention, compliance, or gratitude. I was reclaiming space, asserting boundaries, and teaching consequences in the clearest way I knew how. The protocol was alive, and I was finally the one holding the keys. That night, I scrolled through my phone and froze. Lydia had posted a video, her face red and swollen from tears, speaking directly to an unseen audience. She painted herself as the abandoned victim, betrayed by the wealthy sibling who had everything while she struggled. Her words dripped with drama and urgency, and I could feel the familiar rush of anger building in my chest, the old instinct to defend myself publicly. But I didn't. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I didn't even share a word on social media. Instead, I composed a short, clinical email. No emotion, no judgment, just facts. I told her that if the public narrative continued, I would release my own evidence, documents, and records. My intent was clear. This was a legal and ethical boundary, not a social argument. I sent it, and then I turned off notifications. By morning, the video was gone. My move had already neutralized the immediate threat, but I knew the power struggle was far from over. A week later, at the community courtyard for Alder Rowe's annual charity event, I spotted her immediately. Lydia had approached, her expression carefully calibrated, pleading but polite, desperate yet measured. She had positioned herself in front of the gathering neighbors, her phone tucked away. Her eyes darted to mine, the signal unmistakable. "Hannah," she whispered as I passed, I just need a cosigner. Just a loan. Your name, nothing more." I paused mid-step, taking in the small crowd around us. The light caught the silver railing of the stage, glinting, and I realized she had chosen the most public place possible to leverage peer pressure. People were smiling, watching, oblivious to the tension simmering between us. I met her gaze evenly. "This isn't the place for financial negotiation," I said calmly, voice carrying across the subtle murmur of the crowd. "We're not discussing loans here, Lydia. I am not your cosigner, and I am not funding this for you. Not now, not ever. Ye." Her lips parted, a faint gasp of shock. "But," she began, faltering, this is urgent." I held up my hand, cutting her off silently. "No, we will take this conversation somewhere private, structured, and with witnesses present." I turned slightly to the building manager standing nearby. "Mr. Henderson, can you arrange the community room? A neutral space with a witness?" He nodded instantly, understanding the gravity. "Of course, Ms. Brooks. I'll prepare the room." Lydia's eyes widened, registering the trap she hadn't anticipated. The calm, public refusal had shifted the power. The room became my arena. I would not be ambushed, and I would not be manipulated again. Later, in the beige, neutral space of the community room, I took a seat at the head of the table, Ryan standing behind me, with a steadying hand on my shoulder. Mr. Henderson sat at the far end as the official witness. Lydia sat alone on the opposite side, tense, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. My parents hovered nearby, subdued, unsure. The girls were with Lydia, silent, quietly compliant. I opened my briefcase and laid out the thick binder labeled Evidence, followed by the clean, bullet-pointed memorandum of boundaries. "Lydia," I said, my voice calm but firm, "your recent attempt to solicit a co-signature in a public setting violates the protocol. This is the first warning. I am offering an alternative. 3 consulting sessions. No money, no cosign. Just guidance to manage your own financial crisis. You are free to accept or decline. The choice is yours." Her eyes flickered, anger, surprise, and disbelief mingling. I didn't know," she stammered. "I know," I replied evenly. "Now you do, and this is how the conversation will continue moving forward. Your business, your responsibility. I'm offering knowledge, not my resources. That is the boundary. That is the consequence. And it will be enforced." For the first time, I saw her posture shift, tension draining slightly. She was no longer attacking me. She was facing reality on my terms, and I could feel the subtle power swing completely in my control. The session was tense, electric, but precise. Every clause, every rule, every silent watch of the timer reinforced that I owned my space, my time, and my choices. When the meeting concluded, Lydia left silently, the binder untouched, but the message crystal clear. My parents followed, quiet, subdued, absorbing the lesson without a word. I exhaled slowly. For the first time, the public assault and manipulative pressure had been transformed into a structured, enforceable resolution, and I had remained unshaken, deliberate, and entirely sovereign over my life. The moment I opened Lydia's commercial lease, I could feel the familiar rush of control and clarity I hadn't felt in years. The early termination clause glared at me from the page, predatory, punitive, designed to crush anyone naive enough to sign. I traced the lines with my finger, highlighting every unfair penalty, every responsibility improperly shifted to her. I could see it all clearly now. This was the root of her financial collapse, not some personal failing, not a reflection of her worth, but a system set up to take advantage. I drafted a concise email to a legal aid organization I trusted, a nonprofit specializing in tenant and small business advocacy. I explained the situation, attached the lease, and asked for verification. Am I reading this right? Within an hour, a lawyer called back, crisp, precise, impressed. Hannah, you're correct. The landlord is in material breach. The early termination penalty is invalid. She can also recover her deposit and potentially some business interruption costs. I felt a surge of satisfaction. tempered by the knowledge that I hadn't done this to give Lydia money, but to teach her to fight her own battles with knowledge and tools, not dependency. The first session began over Zoom. I kept my voice steady, professional, as I guided her through her sales data. "Why do you have 800 units of lime green sequin tops sitting idle?" I asked. Her shoulders hunched and her voice faltered. It seemed like a good deal," she muttered. I shook my head, keeping my tone neutral. "Not a good deal if it doesn't sell. Right now, 27% of your entire capital is dead. Your goal isn't profit, Lydia, it's cash flow. We liquidate first, strategize second." Session 2 was grueling. I walked her through her leaks, refunds issued against her stated store policy, unnecessary promotions, missed deadlines. Every number I showed her was a reflection of choices she'd ignored because she expected family to bail her out. "See this?" I said, pointing at the spreadsheet. "These were avoidable. Social loyalty cannot replace business accountability. From today, the policy is final. No exceptions. Your business is not a slush fund." By session 3, the strategy crystallized. I shared my own P&L model, stripped down to the essentials. Every line item revealed where she had overspent, mismanaged, or relied on others to cover her mistakes. I typed the words "zero-based family financing" on the shared screen. "You do not borrow from me. You do not borrow from mom or dad. This business survives or fails on its own numbers. If it cannot, that is the reality, not a family obligation." The tension in her small office was palpable. I could see her fists clench, her jaw tighten, anger and denial swelling. But gradually, it deflated under the weight of incontrovertible facts. Okay," she whispered finally. I get it." Her voice trembled with acceptance. She had faced the full weight of accountability, stripped of any crutch. After 3 weeks, a plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox. It contained a single sheet, her signature at the bottom of the Memorandum of Boundaries. I stared at it, heart tight, barely believing she had voluntarily signed. No pleading, no arguing, just acknowledgement. My phone rang that night. It was my mother. Her voice was light, cautious, almost reverent. "Hannah, I just wanted to tell you, I've been reading the document you gave me every night. I am so ashamed. I'm sorry for what happened. You don't need to respond." Then my father's text arrived. A photograph of an old chair from my childhood bedroom, repaired properly for the first time in decades. I had to sit down, I whispered to myself. I had survived the invasion, the public pressure, the legal maneuvering, and now I was witnessing comprehension, not manipulation. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but they were not sadness or joy. They were release, recognition that the toxic patterns had been disrupted. A week later, Lydia emailed me. "Are you free Tuesday at 7 for session 1? She wrote. No dramatics, no blame, just compliance. She had taken the tools I offered, the legal knowledge, the structured guidance, and finally stepped into responsibility for her own life. Sitting back in my chair, I realized this was the moment the cycle broke. Knowledge, structure, and enforceable boundaries had replaced dependency, pleading, and manipulation. I hadn't given her money. I hadn't sacrificed my autonomy. I had given her the only thing that would allow her to survive on her own, and she had chosen to take it. The feeling was profound, electric, and entirely satisfying. I had created change at the root, and for the first time, it felt real, permanent, and entirely in my control. The sun was bright that Saturday, scattering golden light across the Alder Row courtyard. Ryan and I stood together on the small stage, ready to announce the launch of the Rehabilitation Fund for Low-Income Residents, a program providing at-home devices to those recovering from strokes and injuries. The audience was full, neighbors, colleagues, and members of the HOA, all eager to hear what we had built. My parents sat quietly in the second row, present but silent, witnessing without interfering, a stark contrast to their previous intrusions. As I began speaking, outlining the program's goals, the ethical framework, and the importance of community, I caught sight of Lydia at the edge of the crowd. She wasn't pushing forward. She wasn't demanding attention. She stood back, quiet, her blazer simple, professional, her posture tentative but intentional. She held an envelope in her hands, her eyes meeting mine briefly, acknowledging what had passed and what had been taught. When the applause died down, Lydia stepped forward. My chest tightened. The crowd fell silent as she cleared her throat. "Hi," she began, voice shaky but firm. "I'm Hannah's sister, Lydia." My father's hand twitched, ready to intervene, but my mother's hand on his arm held him back. "I'm not here to take anything," Lydia continued, her voice finding strength as she held the envelope out. "I came to say thank you. Not for money, not for rescue, but for the tools and guidance to save myself. Hannah didn't give me a fish. She taught me how to fish." The crowd's murmurs quieted into attentive stillness. My heart swelled, not with pride, but relief. The lesson had landed. I stepped forward and nodded at her, acknowledging her words without saying anything. The power in that moment was palpable. Lydia's admission wasn't dramatic theatrics. It was recognition. It was accountability. The cycle of dependency and manipulation had broken, replaced with agency and respect. Then my mother, pale but composed, stood. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried over the hushed audience. "Hannah, when I first saw what you built, I thought it extravagant, unnecessary. But now I see, this is your life, your choices. It is beautiful, and I will always ask permission before stepping into it again." She bowed slightly, a gesture of humility and respect I had never witnessed before. I felt a release, a validation not of victory over them, but of the respect and space I had fought for and earned. Ryan stepped beside me, holding out a pair of oversized silver scissors. The ribbon stretched across the small roped-off alcove of the courtyard glimmered in the sunlight. I smiled, feeling the weight of every struggle, every boundary set, every lesson taught. I took the scissors, our fingers brushing, warm and real, and lifted them to cut the ribbon. A single snip echoed, sharp and decisive, and the crowd erupted in applause. This was more than a ceremonial gesture. It was the tangible mark of sovereignty, a life lived on my terms. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A text from my mother. "Hello, darling. We are proud. May we drop by next Saturday just to visit?" A second text from my father. "We're bringing your favorite honey cakes." I looked at Ryan, smiled, and typed back, "Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you for asking first." I didn't open my wallet. I didn't hand over a key. I opened the door on my timing, for the right people, under the conditions I set. The courtyard was alive with warmth, laughter, and community, a stark contrast to the tension and fear that had once defined family interactions here. I took a deep breath, savoring the first true freedom I had claimed for myself, the certainty that my choices, my boundaries, and my life were mine to hold. And to everyone who has listened to this story from start to finish, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a joyful holiday season. Remember, you have the right to your own boundaries, your own choices, and your own life. If this story inspired you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories from women who have reclaimed their lives, faced their struggles, and taken control on their own terms.